So sometimes the father might have problems with drugs or alcohol or whatever, hookers, whatever his vice is, and it don't work. The wise women know to expose their son to strong, positive, driven men. And so she does that unconsciously and might see it years later, as in your case. But you following something that the matriarchs teach the women anyway. If your relationship doesn't work and you can't, for whatever reason, he might have a mental disorder. It might hurt you and the children. So you can't have them around. And the matriarchy tell the women, if you have sons, make sure that they're exposed to the type of men that you want your son to become.
Mm-hmm.
And the exposure allows him to see what his masculine side is supposed to look like. Right? But the women that's caught in the feminist agenda, they don't want their son to exhibit masculine traits. So that the patriarchs that they represent as drag queens can be the dominant male figure for the women to look at. And they all got skeletons in their closet bigger than dinosaurs. And so they, long as our men don't just do what the man supposed to do, it's like in my case, my mama sent me to do this work. She don't send me to do nothing this complex just to be sending me. Somebody finna get this work. My mama said we ain't come from no Africa. I don't need nobody else to tell me nothing after that. We ain't from Africa. My daddy told me about his Native American grandmama hair down to her ankles. I don't need nobody else to tell me nothing. I know what's going on. I read the culture and I read the history. And the culture don't agree with what the history is telling us.
Okay.
So I'm telling the people what the culture say. So the Carolinas is very instrumental in this entire 500-year struggle. It was the Gullah Geechee Big Mama, who was the highest matriarch on the land, called all of the tribes to war against the Spanish in Florida in the Gullah Wars.
Right.
When the Afro chiefs arrived, this is when they started calling us Seminoles. And they said that the Afro chiefs was runaway slaves. That's the Seminole narrative.
Right.
The Gullah narrative is Big Mama said all hands on deck. We got invaders at the door. Some of us went to give support against the French in Louisiana, and the rest of us, all hands was on deck, moving into Florida. That's why Florida, the finish line, right? But the call came from the Carolinas. And this is why Big Mama, Empress Redbird, had to be coming from Carolinas. Because the same place that she emerged is the same place that we got the call. And this is why they were saying that we was runaway slaves. We wasn't running away from plantations. We was running away from family settlements that they had encampments around to keep us on. And when they took Big Mama out, they took her name off Big Mama House and called it the Big House. And Slick Willie, she was married to, dressed up like the butler and put them fancy white folk in them fancy clothes and told them that they was the owner. All the time that house nigga was running the show. This what happened to us. This why we were so adamantly against the house nigga. But see, he used to, behind the scenes, treat Miss Ann them the same way they treated us in the field. And when Miss Ann them get tired of it, they realized that he didn't actually gave them too much power, and they ousted him from the house. He ran out to the field for help. And and we none the wiser. Till after the fact,
Right.
then we start realizing we can't stand them house niggas. King George was solicited by the French to sponsor Georgia as a state to stop us from supporting the Gullahs, and they was put a military force in the state of Georgia to try to
Right.
stop us from giving that back up. This is when we went into the Conjure Wars. This is the
Right.
cause. What's special about the Gullah Geechee people when we talk about the royal families from Africa marrying into the royal families over here before Columbus came, they a prime example of that. They a prime example of that. They knew what tribes that the people that married into the people over here was from. And then their history was changed to the slave narrative. But they was here long before that. Settled on them islands just like you talking about. Their culture itself is seductive to our people because the way that they fuse their indigenous ancestry and their African ancestry is almost hypnotic to experience for us.
Right. Right. Right.
The only we with POWs, they call it the slave trade to try to
Right.
convince us that we came from somewhere else.
Yeah,
We
it was
was
always down.
prisoners of war
Yes.
at home.
Yes. Okay.
But
Go ahead.
I was talking about the Trail of Tears and how they pushed us out on the. That's they were saying we was Africans, but we wasn't no damn Africans. We was already here. That's just to make us not reclaim the land at the close of the age. Trick no good.
Bad.
And,
It's because
and
the
if you
same.
pay attention to what you're saying,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
look, what you're describing is the call back home that Mother Nature giving their kids. When we have to move for a purpose like war, right? We always going to return back to the part of the land we originate from. We have to. It's in our nature. Everybody makes a pilgrimage back home. They don't know why they going. You hear people now, girl, I'm going to Texas. I don't know why I'm going down there, but I got to go to this game. But it got to be the game in Texas. They having the car to go to Texas. They just need an excuse because they seeing something spiritually that they can't explain in the 3D. Nature calling them to Texas. Now they looking for a game in Texas so they can have an excuse to go. Because they don't know how to tell their friends that they just had a spiritual experience and they realize that they need to go to Texas even if it's just to spend the weekend. Dude, it's in their culture, it's in their blood. They know the African kin folks they got on the other side of the water. That's why that's the difference between a lot of the rest of us is that we don't trace back to Africa because we was already here. And if we did, we would be able to Gullah Geechee trace back to Africa.
Right.
They can tell you when they got tribal history of interacting with Africans long before Columbus. They were doing trade and marrying in the royal families with Africans long before Columbus sailed.
Okay. Okay.
They had already had a communication and presence in communication with both sides of the water.
All right.
They
So
want
you
us
saying
to believe that only when the European come did we discover Africans.
all right. All
It's
right.
all up. Listen, they traded. Africans traded with our tribes all up and down the eastern seaboard, including the islands.
What year was this?
This was before Columbus. For
What year
thousands of years. It's nothing new. It's not new to us over here to have interaction with Africans. What's new to us is to tell us that we are Africans when most of us was already here.
Respect, yes.
Right,
So,
yeah, they would be referring to the because they had seafaring tribes long before Columbus sailed. This is how the Moorish navigators knew where to come to look for a settlement.
Right.
Because it was in the log that all of the navigators of the world had at the time. This was just an off-limits land that they wasn't supposed to touch. That's why they call it God's country. The Vikings did come over here before Columbus.
So you talking about the Norse, the Celtic, and the people like that?
They today we call them Hell's Angels because they was given the charter to roam as nomads.
Now, did they hit North America?
Yeah.
What
it's not a myth story. There's artifacts. There's artifacts that accompany that.
What's the artifacts? Where did
they have stone. They have stones that they wrote on when they came. That was here before the settlers by hundreds of years. Discovery Channel did a whole show on it. That's a good place to start. Discovery Channel. The videos on YouTube. But it was produced by Discovery Channel, Vikings in America.
Yeah.
Humans. For lack of a better way of looking at it, they hacked humans. It was a hypnotist named Esther Brooks. If you go to my page on Instagram, the SikApe page, you will see it. But Esther Brooks was the hypnotist who discovered that you can hypnotize somebody, implant a thought, have him deliver a top secret message, never knowing what the message was, based off something that the person you got to deliver the message says to him. Right? This is documented in part of the MK Ultra studies and whatnot. So we know it can be done. What they call demon possession is hacking of a psyche. Where is it being hacked from? We don't know. Sometimes the person will create an egregore to surrender the control to, and this is how you create an alter ego, an alternate ego. The ego is the artificially created self that you believe is you. The alter ego is the artificial self that you create to deal with the parts of life that the regular self refused to deal with. And this is why a lot of like serial killers and whatnot, they classified as multiple personality disorder. He's normally a nice guy, but when he turned into that monster, you don't want to see him. Right? This is what they're talking about. And there's numerous records of people that didn't know any psychic self-defense that used Astro Travel and received a negative effect. But what a lot of us don't know is a lot of the shaman priests used to use Astro Travel in the Conjure War we was in. They were attacking them. If they found out they was travelers, they'd kill them while they was traveling. They'd kill the physical vessel so they can't get back in the body. Right? So they use different means to do that, but because the most powerful ones was the dream walkers, which is actually a form of astral travel or lucid dreaming. On that same note, when you mention those Michaels, right? Yeah. There's still millions of Michaels that ain't shit. You got to remember that part though.
Talk to me.
But when you look at anything that's written with letters, every letter has a color, a numerical value, and a vibrational sound frequency. Right? When you got an ancient name, you got multiple great people imprinting this name, this same name, right? They're creating the power. Now, everybody who have the name won't know how to access the energy. You got to have both the blood and the right. You can't just have one.
And just have one. Okay. Talk to me, Rod.
Right. So if you from a certain bloodline and then they name you a certain name, the numerical value of each letter, the color code of the word, because all of them are a different color. And then when you mix colors, you come up with an original color when you mix different colors together. So it's going to create its own color. And then it's going to have a density to it that can be actualized like an app on a cell phone.
Right.
right? So remember, all of this stuff is egregores, thought forms,
Keep talking about that. You keep talking about that.
right? Because we keep doing this to ourselves, not knowing what we're doing.
Right. Okay.
So, like earlier, you heard Brother Carson say, "Don't say negative stuff to yourself about yourself."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you telling the egregore to be belligerent to the self, right? So if you telling the egregore to be belligerent to the self, and don't fuck around and hit it with a prayer and say amen, because now you told the whole higher God self to amen, be hidden. I don't want to see you in this physical world, right?
Absolutely correct. They actually repurposed the castles. We had too many castles on the land to just destroy them all. So what they did is they repurposed the castles as mental institutions, as state hospitals, as state buildings, government buildings, and prisons. We didn't have no prisons over here. So why are these buildings that's prisons from the 1300s? Architectural style. They wasn't building that style anymore. That style was obsolete. So they didn't build that prison in 1900 like they told you. It was already there. They just took all. That's because we all went to fight in the Gullah Wars. All clans on deck. The Spaniards was the primary obstacle. We also fought the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the English, the Spanish. All of them was working together to come and conquer us. This is a good question because local government is the only government that we actually can control for sure. As long as the people are, yeah, somebody just came in. As long as the people in the local town organize together, then y'all can retake y'all city. It's a FEMA relief call tree that you can get on. Peace, God.
Question, Rod. I'm glad that I'm on here, brother. I appreciate you. I had two questions. The first question is concerning public domain. Public domain, I believe it was used to grab land, right?
No, that was called eminent domain.
So eminent domain was used to grab land. When does that expire?
Eminent domain is when the government come in and acquiesce a piece of land for the purposes of the government. Right? So that's actually a good question. But under once this government finished falling, when enough of us is aware that this shit is over with, when the new system come online, all of the land revert back to its original owners before they contracts, because all of their contracts is now expired. Which means us as the families, that's the organic tribes, we being reorganized in order to resettle the land all over again. It's a reset for a reason.
Okay. And a reset is back to the original owners of the land.
Yeah, it got to go back to the original. That's why I say, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. It's talking about the ancient ones returning. Empress Verdiasi wrote about it. And all it is those old ancestors came back in the modern day from eons gone by to restore the land back to balance and to teach the people how to maintain the balance all over again. Because the Conjure War was fought and won, we can reset back to a golden age.
Okay. My next question, and I'm not going to leave you alone on this and let you ride out. I appreciate you too having your own live and allowing us to come in and talk. And I definitely appreciate you with Young Elder. My next question is I've been doing my research on my family, and I found the Freedman's bank account. What does that have to do with what's going on, at the moment?
Spell the name of the bank account.
Freedman's with the D.
Okay.
Freed. MANS. MANS.
And how did you find it? What was it linked to?
Well, what I did was I went on familysearch.org and I've been just looking at family documents such as military registration records, the draft cards, death certificates, any documentation that came with the family or was, with my family attached to their names in familysearch.org. And I actually found where my great-great-grandfather was a treasury over an account at the Freedmen's Bank. And I have the number and all, but it's like, where do I go from there? I know where his land is. Me and my family have located the land that is with his name. But I'm basically stuck at a dead end right now. What do I do with that?
When the new system come online, they're going to be doing a program at the Small Business Administration to help you identify and locate the family wealth as part of teaching you family banking.
Okay, I already got my sister on the family banking deal. We're starting that. It's 6 of us, so we're putting it together. But go ahead.
When you go when the new system come online, when we repurpose the Small Business Administration, they're going to be holding certification classes in accounting and family banking specifically for us to be competent to handle our own wealth and our own affairs. When you part of that is what you call family forensic branch. This is specialty to the family member that got an eye for detail. The family got to pick the one they send to do forensic investigation by looking at the document.
Now, if you look at those Michaels, Mike Tyson didn't grow up in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan might have went to church, but he grew up on the basketball court. Michael Jackson might have grew up going to the Kingdom Hall, but he grew up as the entertainer. His focus was never on the dogma. It was on the compass that the energy drove him for greatness.
Right.
And when we look at these three, Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson, and Michael Jackson, what's the common denominator besides the name? Dedication to the constant muscle memory training, whether it's the vocal muscles, the basketball muscles, or the boxing muscles. The dedication required is the activation of the warrior Michael angelic energy, as they call it. The only reason why it's even an angelic energy, because it's supposed to be Michelle, but since the patriarchs took over and masculized her.
Ooh, you took it there? It's supposed to be Michelle. Right, man.
But since the patriarchs took it there and masculized her, we men be able to use part of that frequency to a high degree. So it's just the same as putting an app on your phone. You're just putting it in your brain. Right? Now, just because the app on the phone don't mean that anybody on the phone know how to use the app.
Got you.
Right? But if you have a genetic memory of what to do when you get certain apps, you're gonna know. It's gonna be instinct at that point, which they call it instinct, but it's genetic memory. That's why the blood carries the genetic memory. The know-how gives you the right to activate it. That's why you got to have both the blood and the right. You can't just have one. That's why you got two brothers, both of them pretenders to the throne, but one of them not qualified because he wouldn't study. But the one who studied to show himself approved, he can prove that he's worthy and that he did the work by his effort. But the other brother just going to be huffing and puffing mad because he didn't want to do the work because it was hard at the time. But in the retrospect, in the aftermath, what looked like hard work wasn't shit. Right? So it's just an app. All of the names are apps to activate the ego consciousness. Right? It's the same as on the phone. You just got it in your Earth rover. First thing is the jealous God concept is where we got to start at, because first of all, jealousy is a frequency. But in the human animal, jealousy is a learned behavior, and it once was classified as a mental disease or defect by the psychological DSM manual. It used to be called dementia praecox, right, which is a form of schizophrenia. And the jealous God is Enlil himself, right? So just take us back to that Anunnaki shit, because if you leave the Middle East and you study religions like Buddhism, Jainism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, none of their guys is jealous until you get to the Middle East. This Hebrew, Babylonian Yahweh God is the first God on record to openly leave a record saying that he was a jealous God. Jealousy is a learned behavior in humans. So who taught this God to be a jealous human? Right? Because if he was truly jealous, that means that he got a human attribute that he doesn't have the God quality capable of controlling. Right? So the ones who sacrifice like that, it goes to what we was talking about earlier with the white noise. It's not that they don't want to be good in the family they dedicated, because we know subconsciously at some level our ancestors lost the land through sharecropper agreements through a crooked government. And they got meticulous records on it. They told us what they did. It's not no secret. They caught our elders up in sharecropper agreements, and then they destroyed product. So now they can't grow nothing this season. They got to double up on the loan next year, and on the third year they seize it for 9 payments. They've been doing that since they've been here, burning up the farms, burning up the record halls, trying to conceal the dirt. But you got people in the families that's always been record keepers. So they can go back 200 years in their direct family back to their land. Ain't none of this a secret to us, but because of the conjure war we in, and we don't understand the nature of it, is ignorance. Right? Bobby Hemmett tell us, Bobby Hemmett said, look, out of all of the melanated people of the world, there's something special about the ones from this land. Right? We the ones who are the creative men that love the women so passionately that we generate masculine forms of art.
Explain that. What do you mean? What do you mean?
The masculine forms of art is the martial arts. Okay. And then they get this spiritual energy that's extracted from that. Right? But the men do it in order to have a positive outlet for the rage of the masculine. If you can control the outlet, you can control the self. All that stuff is scripted. All them professional sports is scripted. But you know when it ain't? When you play in Little League. It's not scripted. Because you're trying to learn the game. And what else they teach you in the same age as Little League? Board games. These is giving you the rules to how to play the game called life, which takes you to a plutarchy, right? Which is a total domination of all in existence, right? That's the final conclusion of the game of the gods, right? So they tell you all of these examples to go by, but they don't never tell you what they mean, right? Then they get you caught up in moralism, right? That don't got nothing to do with us. We want to be good because it's the nature of those who come into the physical body. But those who wish to experience pain sometimes go bad because the pain drives them in the wrong direction. That's called taking the left-hand path. But how far are you going to go down the wrong path before you realize this ain't for me? Some people get in too deep. Right. So this is the parameters of this conjure war.
You know, Rod, you mentioned the sister Erin Lyons earlier, and we was talking about Lumria. I'm interested in knowing. I've talked extensively with you in the past about Atlantis, but I don't think we've mentioned Lumeria and Mu. I believe that's the same thing. What's your thoughts on Lumeria and its connection to America? We've talked about Atlantis, but I believe Blavatsky said Lemuria was the third root race, Atlantis was the fourth. So Lemuria came before Atlantis. We talk about Atlantis, but people don't talk about Lemuria as much as they give Atlantis love. So what's your thoughts on Lemuria?
Well, they shifting away from Atlantis now and going to Tartaria, right? Mu is a city. Atlantis is an empire. Mu is one of the first concentric cities that the matriarchs made, right? And when they decided to scale the project up, it evolved into what became Atlantis.
Where was
Atlantis is the city of Mu. It was on the island. The island is sank, right? But when they tell you Atlantis, the capital of Atlantis flew away. It didn't sink, right? When they telling you it sunk, it went the other direction. When they tell you that the Noah's Ark floated on the water, that's not what the books say. But nobody don't pay it no attention. They just go right over it. They say that Noah's craft was taken up into the sky, right? And most people is not going to ever see that. But it's not going to make sense unless you realize, how can New Jerusalem be coming back if it ain't never been here, right? Which is also a hijacked terminology to mislead us from what they're talking about. When they call Jerusalem the city of peace, we talking about the capital city of Atlantis, which was a jumper. It was called a jumper ship, right? We didn't been through so many. Everything you can think of has been true at some time or another on Earth. You can't think of nothing that never happened. It all happened, and it probably didn't happen exactly like people tell it, but the general outline of the story is still consistent with the historical record of the planet, because we went through the cycles and cycles on top of cycles. This is nothing new, right? So we go through the cycles, and then when the cycle gets so bad, somebody got to clean it up. It had to be cleaned up at the close of every age.
Why did its capital move? Why did it sink?
It just the shifting of the land masses. But Atlantis flew away because of war. The capital of Atlantis flew away because of war. Mu sucked because over time it wasn't functional, because it was already at sea level. So when the sea level